After watching this video, you're probably going to reread the entire series. Chapter 257 of Jujutsu Kaisen has recently recontextualized a huge amount of the series by having tons of crazy reveals. These include Yuji having a finger of Sukuna inside of him since day 1, Yuji having a role within the culling game before he was even born, and Sukuna being Yuji's strange soul uncle, but we'll call him uncle for the sake of simplicity. And I value the time of both you and I, so I'll get straight into talking about the plot points from the past that either foreshadow this reveal or can now be seen in a different way due to Sukuna and Yuji's true connection being revealed. But before we do, if you like content such as this, don't forget to subscribe as I have a ton of videos like this coming, and many more on my channel for you to watch if this wasn't enough. Now, let's get into the video. When Megumi first met Yuji, he thought he sensed residue of Sukuna on Yuji. However, Megumi had only said this because there was no possible way that he could ever put together Yuji's true origin at this point of the story. With the recent reveal of Sukuna having been sealed inside of Yuji since he was born, the truth behind this scene seems as if what Megumi was truly sensing was Sukuna himself within Yuji, or at least a bit of his cursed energy. This is something you can assume, however, I think this is the truth. With Yuji's cursed energy getting amped with each finger he consumes, I believe that Sukuna may have actually awakened within him due to his cursed energy spiking after eating a finger for the first time, akin to Sukuna's techniques awakening within him in recent chapters, rather than Yuji just consuming the finger and having Sukuna incarnate into him at that moment. If this was the case, I did see people ask why Yuji never had curses chase after him or anything of the sort if he'd always been a finger, and I think this could be explained in chapter 1 where Megumi says, after many years, the seal weakens and the talisman essentially changes form. Then it attracts curses and feeds on them. With Yuji being a human seal for Sukuna, I'm sure that this is the reason why curses never sensed them until chapter 1. Another thing I've been seeing everywhere is that Yuji was never the 1 in a million host, nor was it some twist where both Megumi and Yuji were the chosen ones who could both contain Sukuna, but Megumi was the only chosen one, since Yuji was revealed to have been artificially made to be a vessel, rather than some person who just hit the lotto and was born with this ability, which is a great observation to think about because in chapter 213, Sukuna points out that he knew Megumi had the ability to cage him, which is why he waited for his soul to be defeated and crushed, whereas when it came to Yuji, Sukuna was surprised that he was even able to contain him. I believe this adds on to Sukuna's frustration with being trapped in Yuji, because Sukuna states that Yuji's soul is unbreakable. If you think about it, what this would mean is that Sukuna would have way less opportunity to break out of Yuji than really anybody else that hosted him, as Yuji's soul would never waver enough for Sukuna to completely take over if ever presented with the opportunity. I think when it comes to Yuji's soul, Kenjaku may have played a role in making Yuji's soul unbreakable. Maybe. This detail also reinforces Megumi's insane talent and protagonist-like moveset, and how all of these special traits of his contributed to him living such a miserable life. It's quite tragic that this world does everything in its power to constantly weigh Megumi down with more and more tragedy. Moving on from Megumi, I want to move on to Yuji's grandfather. Yuji's grandfather would curse Yuji himself, telling him to help others no matter what, just help others. I do believe that if we combine this flashback with Jin alongside him cursing Yuji, he was well aware of Yuji being a Sukuna vessel. I believe that what Wasuke did with that curse was set Yuji on the path to fight Sukuna whatever way he would need to down the line, whether it was physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever. This curse specifically seems to be one made to stand against Sukuna in every single way possible. This plot point does raise questions though. If Jin happens to be the twin soul brother of Sukuna, and that's why he and Yuji bear resemblance to him, then why does Wasuke physically resemble Sukuna more than really anybody else in the cast? The Itadori family could be even more connected to Sukuna than we think now, or Kenjaku could have done even more tampering than we believe. But I think that's something that will be revealed later on. Just let me know what you guys think about this. Another crazy detail that most overlooked was the fact that we've never truly seen Yuji and Sukuna consume a total of 19 fingers on screen. Throughout the story, we would see Yuji consume fingers up to a point where we thought he had only eaten 15 fingers. Then Sukuna would take over his body and move all of his fingers into Megumi. So at this moment, we were led to believe that Sukuna had only 15 fingers in Megumi's body. After the 1 month time skip, we would then see a panel with 3 fingers and Uraume apologizing for being unable to find the final finger. Most people here assume that Uraume had just brought the rest of the fingers, not taking the panel as literal as it's supposed to be. If Sukuna had 15 fingers in him with Uraume handing him 3 more, we just assumed that the 4th finger couldn't fit on the page or something. Whatever, It's just Sukuna's fingers. No reason to pay so much attention to detail, right? Well, after chapter 257, we now know that Sukuna was at 16 fingers here instead of 15, and Uruume was handing him 3, making it 19 fingers in Sukuna and apologizing for being unable to find the final 20th finger. Why is this? Well, Yuji again already had the first finger. So when he ate the finger in chapter 1, that was actually his second finger. So when we thought Sukuna was operating at 15 fingers, he was truly operating at 16. Basically, Yuji has always had one more finger than we thought inside of him, and it was in our faces all along. But I think Gege banks on us just not overthinking about little details like this, and it tends to work in his favor. This reminds me of Gojo and Sukuna's first domain clash. We had always had all the details as to how a clash of a barrierless domain and a regular domain would play out spread throughout the entire story. But most people just didn't put the details together and thought something else would happen since it's a battle of divine gods, right? This whole Yuji always having had Sukuna sealed within him thing is truly a mind-blowing revelation to say the least. And I'm not happy that I'm gonna have to reread this entire story all over again just to see if there are more things I missed and anything like that, right? And speaking of something I could have missed, I missed something. While editing this video, I've come to remember that when Sukuna grabs his own corpse's head and begins to eat it to make up for a finger, he asks if this is supposed to be ironic to both Tengen and Kenjaku. And now we know that he was probably saying this because he ate himself as a kid and now he's eating himself again to regain his full strength. I think that may be the reason why. However, we should question why he's asking Tengen this. Could Tengen be his mother? Who knows? So let's move on from Sukuna's finger always being inside of Yuji to Yuji's participation in the culling games being a thing before he was even born. When Kogane appears and speaks to Yuji and Megumi, Megumi starts to question why Yuji is already a player within the culling game, since from his perspective, Yuji wasn't someone who was given a cursed technique or item by Kenjaku, nor had he entered a colony yet. Yuji suggests that this was because of Sukuna, but Megumi's like, no, you consumed Sukuna's finger of your own will. I'm sure of it, I'm a witness, all that. And since they were in sort of a rush, they just put this aside and focused on the culling game itself. What makes this scene interesting in retrospect is that most readers saw this and just assumed it was because of Sukuna that Yuji was placed into these culling games, despite Megumi making a huge fuss here. Now with the recent reveal, we know that it's because Kenjaku had given Yuji a finger when he was born. Another interesting moment I want to check out now is when Kenjaku says that Yuji is a thing that he no longer has use for. While saying that, he and Sukuna are the eye of the storm for the new era. At first this just seemed like some confusing nonsense coming from Kenjaku, but with more information, I do believe that this hints at something beyond Sukuna in this current arc. I can see Sukuna getting away here as this new era begins with the existence of two beings such as Yuji and Sukuna. Speaking of the two, let me segue into how this philosophical battle between the two has been reinforced by the recent reveals as well. Yuji resembling the selflessness of Jujutsu sorcery, while Sukuna representing selfishness is no secret. But the reveal of Jin and Sukuna being one being that split apart makes the dynamic of Yuji and Sukuna more deep than it already was. Sukuna's selfishness causing him to eat his own brother, and that same brother being the primary cause of his undoing, is quite satisfying. We know that Jin was well aware of the risk of having a child with Kenjaku, judging by his conversation with his father, but he was more than willing to ignore the consequences if it meant that his child would be born into this world. In a way, Jin's selflessness for Yuji did cause him to be brought into this world and is a physical manifestation of the retribution that Sukuna must suffer for his life of hedonism that began before he was even born. I think that this could be a reason as to why Sukuna gets so upset at seeing Yuji. Yuji is simultaneously everything that Sukuna stands against while being a representation of his own actions being his undoing. Of course, Jin's actions alone aren't what has given Yuji this chance to defeat Sukuna. Yuki's book, his brothers allowing him to eat them so he can use blood manipulation, Gojo's sacrifice and going against Sukuna first so the heroes could have a chance, and even more. Many sacrifices have been made for the sake of this moment here. All of these people who live for something beyond themselves are seeing their sacrifices come to fruition in the face of overcoming the strongest sorcerer in history. I also want to throw this theory out there that the separation of Sukuna and Jin is a separation akin to the good half and the bad half of somebody who's been separated, as it was the soul that was split. Because Sukuna seems to be, before anything else, selfish and is downright evil. And Jin, on the other hand, seemed to display nothing but love toward the people around him, so much love that it made him quite ignorant of the consequences behind it. I'm sure that there's some foreshadowing I missed somewhere within the story, no doubt, but you guys get the point. Some of these things were in the story all along, hinting toward this, or just crossing us up, and it's infinitely interesting to look back at this now. Kenjaku is a true demon and a deviant. And all this to say, let Gege Akutami cook, cause the switch up after this chapter has been insane. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and with that being said, I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace out.